Hey guys, well, let's begin. Tonight. We follow a king who sweats through velvet, bleeds into leather, and farts in the face of history. Welcome to the life and very slow, very smelly death of Henry VIII. To be honest, you probably won't survive this. Picture it. The year is 1509, and you're following behind a 17-year-old prince who's just become king. He's tall, broad-shouldered, with coppery hair and a jawline so sharp it could slice ham. Women swoon, men cheer. His calves alone are considered national treasures. But it's summer in London. The air is thick with smoke, sewage, and the faint aroma of cooked eels. And Henry? He's drenched in sweat, grinning, reeking of rose oil and raw ambition. You already feel the dampness seeping through your tunic, so before the lights go out, click like and subscribe, but only if you're brave enough to return tomorrow night. Drop your city and the time down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan, because silence makes this story worse, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking alongside Henry through the gardens of Greenwich Palace. He's just finished a brutal game of tennis, shirtless, his chest gleaming like buttered pork, and now he's talking about Latin philosophy while chugging ale. He's fluent in 4 languages, writes poetry, and composes music on the lute. He's charming, charismatic, annoyingly athletic, but also, he kind of stinks. No one bathes much in Tudor England, but Henry takes it to another level. Despite having a palace filled with servants, perfumers and scented herbs, he believes frequent bathing weakens the body. So he's marinating in sweat, day after day, under layers of embroidered silk and ermine. You're close enough to hear the sloshing inside his boots. You wonder, how does this golden boy turn into the swollen, festering horror show you've seen in paintings? Well, it starts here, because all that shine, it's covering a slow momentic collapse. With appearances, you watch him smear his teeth with a mix of crushed alabaster and honey before banquets. It's meant to whiten his smile, but in reality, it softens the enamel. You'll want to remember that. Those teeth don't stay pretty for long. Now you're watching him wrestle a courtier in front of Queen Catherine of Aragon. He's competitive to the point of insanity. He'll risk broken bones for the thrill of winning, even when it's just for show. His nose bleeds. He laughs. You flinch as he smears the blood on his doublet like a badge of honor. Historians still argue whether young Henry was masking early health issues or just drunk on his own perfection. But either way, his body is already sounding quiet alarms. He has terrible headaches, often blamed on the pressures of ruling. He sweats constantly, even in the cold. His joints ache after hunts, though no one dares mention it, not to a man who wrestles bears for sport. Literally. You once saw him slap a bear. By nightfall, you're sitting in his chamber. He's gulping down roast beef and sugared plums. Wine spills down his chin. His skin shines under candlelight, flushed, fevered. You catch a whiff of something sour. He belches, loud, and then he scratches at a boil forming under his arm. That's new. It's not the only one. The court doctors chalk it up to excess heat in the blood. Their advice? More wine, less sadness. Maybe rub in some ground emeralds. You stare at the glistening lump and wonder if anyone's noticed that their radiant king is already lucky. Outside, people are dying of the sweating sickness. It hits fast, chills, dizziness and death within hours. You think about how much Henry sweats, and you worry. But somehow, he never catches it. Not yet. Instead, he plows ahead with feasts, jousts and bedroom escapades. Dozens of them. Sometimes with women, sometimes with food. One of the court's fringe healers suggests Henry's immense appetite might be masking imbalanced humors. Another says it's all the planetary alignments. You file that away as Tudor medical nonsense and try to keep your distance during meals. His breath is already starting to smell like rotting fruit. There's one quiet moment he won't forget. He's standing on a balcony at night, looking out over the Thames. No crowds, no servants, just you and him, and the sound of the river slapping against the piers. He mutters something strange under his breath. All this will be dust. It's the first time you realize he knows. Somewhere inside that golden body, something is already slipping. And so you back away, careful not to disturb him, as the great King Henry VIII, still young, still burning bright, leans on the railing, hand trembling ever so slightly. You wake to the sound of Henry screaming at a servant, loud, sharp, brutal. The words echo through the stone halls, ricocheting like cannon fire, and the smell hits you next. Not the sour sweat or greasy hair you're used to. This is different. Rancid, hot, like spoiled milk left in a fireplace. It's his mouth. You follow behind as he storms through the corridor, red-faced and spitting mad. A groom had the nerve to offer him plain water instead of his preferred claret mixed with honey. You'd think someone had tried to assassinate him. Here's the thing. Henry VIII is addicted to sugar, imported at great cost. It's a royal delicacy, used in everything from pies to stews to medicine. He even rubs it on his gums when he's anxious. You watch him pop candied orange peels into his mouth like a child sneaking snacks. He's got an entire room filled with sugar sculptures, lions, ships, dragons, edible trophies to his greatness. Ooh, but it's ruining him. His teeth, once perfect for royal portraits, are turning black. One molar crumbles during a feast. He spits it onto a napkin and shrugs. Just the price of pleasure, he jokes, even as blood stains his chin. His breath could knock out a horse. People step back without seeming to. Courtiers fan themselves violently just to blow the air away. One chambermaid calls it dragon's breath. She's dismissed the next morning. You start to notice how people adjust around him. No one talks about his mood swings out loud, but everyone knows when to scatter. 1 minute he's reciting love poems, the next he's threatening to execute a bishop. He slams doors, throws goblets, rips off wigs in court. The man is a walking tantrum with a crown. Historians still argue whether Henry's rage came from chronic pain, sugar-fueled inflammation, or sheer royal ego. Maybe all three. But here's the weird part. He's painfully self-aware about it. After an outburst, he'll write letters of apology, tearful ones, as if he doesn't know who lives inside him. You're in the privy chamber when the apothecary arrives with a new tooth syrup. It's thick, black, and smells like vinegar and herbs. You gag just watching Henry gargle with it. He spits blood into a gold basin, wipes his beard and smiles with a red-streaked grin. Better? He asks. Not really. And the tooth pain gets worse. He presses his temples and grinds his jaw. You see the veins bulge in his forehead like ropes. At night, you hear him moaning. Sometimes he groans your name, not because he cares about you. He just wants you to bring more sugar. He chews whole sticks of cinnamon like it's candy, sucks on cloves, drinks rose water to sweeten the breath, which is like spraying perfume on a dead fish. One day you notice he's holding the side of his face during council meetings, not dramatically, just a quiet, constant pressure, like something's pulsing under the skin. You wonder if an abscess is forming, but no one dares look. That side of his mouth, off limits now. When a French ambassador comments on the king's smile, Henry orders him reassigned to Calais, harsh winter, bad wine, and no indoor toilets. Even his lovers can't escape the mouth madness. Anne Boleyn, brilliant, sharp-tongued, once made a joke about his grinning skull. The next morning she's not allowed to see him. For a week. He broods, binge-eats spiced pears, and dictates cruel notes. You sneak a look at one. It's all insults and sugar-high poetry. But the decay keeps spreading. His gums swell, he drools in his sleep, and by now every royal portrait is being painted just slightly mouthless. Artists give him that tight-lipped, neutral face, not because he's pensive, but because they're painting around the rot. And with the teeth going, the temper only gets worse. You hear about servants whipped for looking the wrong way. A cook is sent to the tower because his lamb was under-seasoned. Henry doesn't want food. He wants flavor that punches him in the face, hard, probably because his mouth barely registers taste anymore, just pain and sweetness. The palace starts to feel like a zoo with one unstable lion. Everyone tiptoes. You do too. You keep your sentences short, your face still. Sometimes you're not sure if you're watching a king or surviving a monster. One morning, he calls you close. His lips are cracked, his voice low. He asks, "Do you think I'm mad?" The room is still. You think of 1,000 answers and settle on, "No, Your Majesty, only in pain." He nods, like he expected you to lie, and then reaches for another candy date. That night, you light incense before entering his chamber, not for ceremony, just to mask the scent, the sweet, sickly odor of decay behind royal curtains. You wonder how long it'll stay contained behind his grin, and whether he'll ever be able to eat without bleeding. You're staring at his thigh again, not on purpose, it's just hard to miss. Henry is hobbling toward you. The saddle sores are back. It starts small, just raw patches from hours on horseback, but you've watched them swell, split and ooze over time. Henry won't stop riding, even now with a court physician begging him to stay out of the sun and off the horses. "A king who doesn't hunt is no king," he snaps, tossing back more wine. You watch his leg twitch. That twitch, that's the pain talking. This is the war hero era of Henry, early 30s, broad as a barn, still hungry for glory and desperate to impress foreign allies. You trail him to a military parade in Calais. He's trying to relive the fire of his youth, sword flashing, armor clanking, sweat pouring down his neck like hot wax. He beams at the crowd and bellows with laughter. But afterward, you peel his armor off, and what's underneath is not so glorious. His linen undershirt sticks to his back like a bandage. Boils are bubbling across his shoulder blades. His thighs are red and cracked. You squint at a particularly nasty one. It looks like it's beginning to blacken. The court barber suggests lancing it. Henry tells him to go lance himself. You don't say anything. You just help him out of his boots while pretending not to gag. The foot stench alone could end a treaty. Historians still argue whether Henry's body began breaking down from infection or untreated diabetes, or if it was the sheer wear and tear of living like a testosterone grenade. One thing's certain, his body is attacking itself, from skin to spirit. You remember a detail most folks don't. He has a high pain tolerance, or maybe just stubbornness so thick it acts like morphine. He once cut his hand on a hunting spear and didn't notice until dinner time. That kind of denial isn't bravery, it's a setup for rot. A few weeks later, you're summoned to the royal tent. Henry is in bed, leg elevated, muttering curses. The sore has deepened. You can see the edge of the wound beneath the bandage. Greenish, weeping, and rimmed with blackened flesh. The smell hits you like a brick wall, sweet, sour, almost metallic. A surgeon approaches with a heated blade. You turn your head before the slicing starts. Henry bites down on a strip of leather. The scream is short, but gut-wrenching. The wound hisses like fried bacon. You don't sleep that night. Next day, he's on his feet again. Sort of. 2 pages support him as he limps through court, refusing to show weakness. The rumor is he walked a full mile. Reality, he made it 40 yards, then threw a chair at a messenger for smirking. Still, he keeps fighting, keeps marching. One of the weirder moments? A German alchemist claims he can rebalance Henry's pain with mercury. You watch as the king smears the silver goo on his leg with a shaky hand. 2 hours later, he's vomiting into a tapestry. That was a one-time experiment. Back in court, you overhear a joke. If you follow the king long enough, you'll step in something royal. No one loudly, but everyone's thinking it. His armor starts to get heavier, not literally, but in how it affects him. After each campaign or parade, he's a little slower getting up, a little redder in the face. You once catch him panting behind a curtain, clutching his ribs, muttering prayers between gasps. Old age? You asks. Glory, he snaps. You're beginning to understand that Henry isn't just afraid of illness. He's terrified of being irrelevant, weak, forgotten, and his body, cruelly, seems to know that. It picks at his pride with every boil and sore. You help him into the bath once, a rare moment of hygiene. The water turns murky fast. You watch dead skin swirl around his knees like wet paper. He's silent the whole time, except for one question. Do you think God notices the strong more than the beautiful? You don't answer. You just wring out the sponge and keep scrubbing. Weeks later, at a royal hunt, he nearly falls off his horse, not because of a wild boar or a charging deer, but because his saddle sore burst mid-ride. He collapses back at camp. You have to cut the breeches away from the wound, which now looks like a peeled fruit, raw, wet, glistening. You nearly faint. Henry just laughs. Tell no one, especially the French. You try. But the stink spreads, faster than gossip. The joust starts with trumpets. Gold banners ripple in the breeze. The crowd roars. You're perched just behind the royal barrier, heart thumping. Henry is already in the saddle, visor down, a steel titan on a horse as big as a kitchen. He's 44 now, thicker in the neck, slower in the limbs, but his pride, still razor sharp. You try to say something. Maybe this is a bad idea, or remember your leg, but it's too late. His horse charges. The world turns into thundering hooves and polished lances and the sharp crack of metal. Then, just silence. Henry is on the ground, motionless. The other rider's lance caught him under the chin, hard enough to slam his head back and unhorse him. He didn't raise his visor in time, didn't even flinch. You're running before anyone else does, slipping through the hay and confusion. When you reach him, his body is twisted, like someone dropped a statue. His eyes are closed. His leg, the bad one, is under the horse. Been breathing. Everyone panics. You watch grown men cry. One courtier actually vomits into his sleeve. For a full 2 minutes, your king, your massive, terrifying, all-consuming king, is dead. And then he twitches. The breath jerks back into him like a blast of wind. His mouth opens, blood trickling down from one corner. He coughs. You swear the sound echoes through the entire tilt yard. He survives, but he's never the same. Historians still argue whether this was the moment that broke him, if the brain injury subtly rewired his mind. After this, his moods darken, his memory flickers, he becomes crueler, colder. But from your point of view, it's the leg. The leg didn't just get bruised under the horse, it got smashed, shattered muscle, deep bruising, the old jousting wound from years before. This blow rips it wide open. You help carry him back to his chamber, but you can't look directly at the damage. It smells awful. Even through layers of fabric, you get a whiff of something dead. The doctors prod and poke, muttering about gangrene, bad humours, devil's breath. The truth? The leg wound never closes again. For the rest of Henry's life it will fester, reopen, oozes pus that stains his sheets, his socks, even the throne cushion. You get used to the sound of him groaning in the morning, and the smell, oh, that becomes part of court life. They light candles, burn herbs, even crush lavender into the floorboards. But nothing hides the stink of a man rotting from the inside out. He walks less now, stands only when required, and even then with help. His breeches are specially tailored with hidden slits, so the wound can be drained without stripping him. A servant's job, sometimes your job. And the pus? Thick, yellowish, occasionally streaked with green. Once it bubbles. A doctor says that's a hopeful sign. You silently disagree. You learn the daily routine. Wash the wound with vinegar, pat it with linen, apply a poultice made of dried herbs, mouldy bread, and occasionally, if the barber surgeon is feeling adventurous, moss scraped off a chapel wall. You've also seen chicken fat used, goose feathers applied, and on one bizarre day, what looked suspiciously like frog jelly. Does it help? No. But Henry insists on treatments. He wants control. You catch him writing in his journal, yes, he still keeps one, describing the leg as my trial, a test from God. Sometimes, when he's drunk, he compares it to Christ's wounds. Then he laughs, until it hurts too much to breathe. One night he wakes up screaming. You run to his chamber. The wound ruptured again. Blood everywhere. It soaks the mattress, pools on the floor. He's shaking. His temperature is sky high. His eyes are glassy. You think, this is it. But no, he clings to life with the stubbornness of a barnacle. They bleed him, leech him, apply hot compresses. He curses through every moment, calls everyone's cowards, then weeps like a child when the pain spikes. Afterward, he sleeps for 20 hours straight. When he wakes, he doesn't remember your name. The court shifts to accommodate the leg. Rooms are rearranged to minimize stairs. Chairs reinforced. Schedules shortened. He holds counsel from bed more often now. Ministers whisper that he reeks. The closest ones carry scented cloths in their sleeves to breathe through. And the fashion changes. Long coats, stiff collars, anything to draw the eye up and away from the swelling at his feet. He starts wearing a garter on the opposite leg, as if to distract from the bandaged horror just inches away. You hear courtiers refer to it behind his back as the royal curse. They say it talks in his sleep, that it pulses like it's alive. Some even whisper it's punishment for Anne Boleyn, or for the monasteries, or maybe just for being Henry. You've stared at it too long. You've watched skin die, watched flies hover near his feet in summer, watched linen turn red with no one touching it. You believe the wound is its own character now, part of him, like a second mouth, oozing secrets. Every now and then he asks, is it getting better? And you always say yes. Because what else can you say to a king who is slowly being devoured by his own leg? You've stopped eating meat, not because of religion or morals, but because watching Henry chew through his fifth greasy haunch of mutton while sweating profusely has put you off food entirely. Today, you're at a royal banquet, one of those endless feasts where the table stretches like a hallway and no one knows what half the dishes are. There's swan, peacock, eel pie, rabbit drowned in clotted cream, and something called black pudding that honestly looks like it's already been digested once. And Henry? He's devouring it all like the world might end before dessert. You've noticed something weird. He always drinks from a pewter goblet. Always. You ask a servant why, and they shrug. It's the good stuff, they say. Heavy metal, durable, expensive. But what no one... You pause. Lead. As in, poison. It's not just the cups. The glaze on the ceramic dishes, lead-based. The wine, stored in lead-sealed barrels. Even the powdered sugar on the fruit tarts might be cut with lead oxide to make it sparkle. You watch Henry toss back another goblet of spiced wine and wonder how much of his brain has already melted. Historians still argue whether Henry's erratic behavior in later years was driven by lead poisoning. The symptoms fit: mood swings, abdominal pain, memory loss, infertility, paranoia, tremors. You've seen all of those up close. Then there's the meat. Always the meat. Huge quantities, often undercooked. Stored in less than refrigerated conditions, sometimes left out for hours before serving. There's a running joke among the kitchen staff. If it's moving, cook it more. If it isn't, serve it fast. You remember one night, watching Henry tear into a goose leg while something white slid out the side. You said nothing, just quietly took a mental note. Never eat fowl again. He doesn't just eat like a king, he eats like a siege. He piles food in front of him like he's defending the throne with calories. 6, 7 courses, sometimes more. And all of it swimming in sauces thickened with, wait for it, more lead. You try to calculate how much heavy metal is in his bloodstream and give up halfway through dessert. Then the vomiting starts. One afternoon, after a particularly meaty light lunch, he doubles over, grabs his gut, and empties his stomach right onto a tapestry of St. George. Not the floor, not a bucket, a priceless wool hanging. The whole court pretends it didn't happen. You help him to a chair. He's pale, shivering, and whispering something you can't make out. His hands are shaking. His pupils look off. Different sizes. His breath smells like wine and something else, like copper coins soaked in vinegar. The doctors call it an imbalance of the humours, obviously. Everything's either too hot, or too wet, or too full of bile. You suggest maybe it's the food. Maybe it's the materials. You're immediately removed from the room for being disruptive. He gets better, sort of. But every meal now is a gamble. Sometimes he finishes with a smile. Sometimes he clutches his belly and screams at the ceiling. He blames the cooks, the weather, France, Weber himself. The truth is, Henry eats because he's anxious, because he's bored, because his body is failing and food is the only thing that still delivers a burst of pleasure. And it's not just the main courses, it's the snacks, sweetmeats, dried fruits soaked in sugar, almond milk thickened with honey. Even his medicine is candy-coated. One courtier whispers a theory, his stomach's pickled, inside out. You believe it. His stools, when discussed, and they are, more than you'd like, range from solid and heroic to alarming puddle. He sometimes sends them to physicians in sealed boxes, demanding analysis. You've watched a scholar open one, sniff it and mutter, "The king's spirit is cloudy." The king's spirit, huh? You'd say it smells like fear, fat and rotten meat. By winter he's got indigestion so bad he sleeps upright, the legs still oozing, and now his belly is bloated. Not with pride, but with trapped gas and unresolved anger. You watch him belch in the middle of mass, and then pretend nothing happened. Worse, the appetite remains. He still craves it all. Venison, pork pies, pomegranate stews. His lips slick with grease, his fingers dusted with sugar. You once caught him licking a roast duck bone like it owed him money. And yet, there's something sad in his eyes now. At one private meal, just you and a few others, he sets down his spoon mid-course and sighs. "What's the point of all this?" he asks. No one answers. No one dares. Later you find a letter on his desk, unsent. It reads, "My soul grows heavy, though my table remains full." You fold it quietly, you say nothing. And the next morning he asks for roast boar and cream. You're holding a small glass vial filled with golden liquid. It's warm, fresh. The royal physician is squinting into it like it holds the future of England. Welcome to Tudor medicine. Today's diagnosis? Henry's urine. Huppies into ornate flasks, sometimes 3 times a day. Each sample is carried through a hush-filled hallway, set onto a silver tray, and inspected like a gemstone. You've watched men sniff it, swirl it, even taste it. Yes, taste, with the tip of a tongue. Supposedly, this reveals everything from digestion to divine punishment. All it reveals to you is who at court has no self-preservation instinct. Henry doesn't bat an eye. He thinks it's science, but you can see the panic in his eyes every time the doctor frowns. He doesn't want truth, he wants comfort. So they tell him what he wants to hear. "Excellent clarity, Your Majesty. A royal golden hue. Only the noblest kings produce such noble water." You roll your eyes so hard you nearly pass out. This is how medicine works here. A little urine, a few Latin phrases, a prayer or two, maybe a bleeding session if things seem dramatic enough. It's a horror show of guesswork dressed in velvet. And right now, Henry's health is unraveling like wet parchment. The leg wound? Still seeping. They've wrapped it in bandages soaked with wine and goose grease, then topped it with a paste made from breadcrumbs and crushed mint. It smells like a meatball sandwich. And it's not healing. The doctors talk in hushed tones about mortification of the flesh. You know what they mean. Death. Spreading inward, slowly. But no one dares say that to his face. Instead, they bring charts. Ooh, peak charts. You've seen them, little drawings of urine and goblets, each a slightly different shade. Pale yellow for good health, brown means heat in the liver, red is too much blood, milky white, prepare for death. Henry's usually somewhere between sunset cider and sun-settling marmalade. Historians still argue whether these diagnoses helped at all, or just delayed real treatments. Some say they were the best tools they had, Others call them medieval cosplay with consequences. Meanwhile, new symptoms keep arriving. His skin is dry and scaly. His eyes are bloodshot more often than not. He's sweating less now, which sounds like a good thing, until you realize it means his body's giving up on flushing itself out. He's always hot. Not sexy hot, boil the walls hot. They fill rooms with ice blocks. He insists on windows open even in winter. You once saw him sitting shirtless in a snow-dusted chair, steaming like a baked potato. A new physician recommends a radical cure, sweating chambers. You sit with Henry in a wooden box, only his head poking out while herbs smoulder below. He coughs, chokes, sweats so much the chair squelches. Then he vomits. Again. A cleansing, they call it. You call it torture disguised as aromatherapy. But Henry keeps trying. Every day brings a new treatment. Leeches, bloodletting, barley poultices, warm ale infused with crushed pearls. You've watched a man whisper Latin over his wound. You've watched another press a dead frog to it. Draws out the rot, he said, holding the frog up like it had magic powers. Nothing works. He starts asking strange questions like, how many people died of bad air last winter? Or, do you think my liver still functions? One day he stares at the ceiling and whispers, is this how Caesar felt? You consider answering, but then he changes the subject and asks for fig pudding. Behind closed doors, the physicians bicker. Some think he has a fever of the blood. Others say his kidneys are rotting. One young surgeon suggests something radical, amputation. The older ones gasp, like he proposed beheading the Pope. It's shot down. The king must have all his parts, even if one smells like swamp mud and leaks like a cracked barrel. Then, one night you're summoned urgently. Henry's not breathing right. His chest wheezes. His leg is bleeding again. The room is humid with fear. You rush in. And he's laughing. He's pranking the doctors. He fake groaned and held his breath just to watch them panic. I live still, he bellows, raising a goblet of wine. You almost walk out, but you don't, because beneath that smirk you saw it, the flicker of real terror. He's not pranking for fun. He's testing their fear, testing whether anyone is ready for him to die. You're not. Neither are you. By dawn, a new herbalist is called in. He brings something unusual, powdered rhino horn, claimed to restore virility and draw out illness. You're not even surprised anymore. You could bring in a potion made from comet dust and pickled bat wings and someone would say, yes, that sounds very promising. The king takes it, chokes on it, throws up into his own slipper. You help clean him, again. You've watched Henry cling to every absurd treatment, every stale ritual, every ridiculous elixir. Not because they work, but because they promise that he's still in control, still a king, still alive. Even as his body keeps slipping away. You hear him before you see him, a deep, guttural grunt echoing through the corridor, followed by the unmistakable sound of furniture dragging. When you round the corner, you catch a glimpse of Henry, face red as a beet, hands gripping a banister so tightly his knuckles look ready to snap. He's trying to stand, and failing. Again. The joints in his knees are swelling, stiff as iron. He's sweating through his embroidered robe, veins popping along his temples, and muttering curses that would make a bishop faint. His legs are enormous, twice the size they were a decade ago, inflamed, twisted, gout, the so-called king's disease. And oh, does he have it bad. The court likes to joke behind closed doors, gout is the only thing that outranks Henry. But nobody laughs when he tries to walk. Every step is an ordeal. Every morning, a negotiation. Sometimes he cries out in pain just from stretching his feet out of bed. You've learned the signals. The sharp hiss through clenched teeth means brace me. The barked, leave me, means stand perfectly still and don't blink. The hardest one is the silence, because that means the pain has hollowed him out. Historians still argue how much of Henry's collapse was accelerated by gout. Some think it was the primary engine, flaring his temper, disabling his mobility, ruining his circulation. Others say it was just one of many horsemen galloping through his bloodstream. But from where you stand, literally supporting his bulk as he grunts toward the privy, it's hard not to blame the feet. And the food. Always the food. You remember watching him eat a goose liver pâté shaped like a miniature cathedral? He ate the bell tower first, and washed it down with red wine so strong it stripped the polish off the goblet. He won't stop. He can't stop. Sugar, fat, alcohol, all feeding the gout that's calcifying his joints and cooking him from the inside out. His fingers now curl slightly inward, too swollen to flex. His toes look like overripe grapes. One night, during a particularly bad flare-up, his right ankle balloons so large the footman mistakes it for a bundled cloak. The leg is packed in cold compresses. Someone suggests bleeding the foot. Another says, let the poison rise and cut it from the knee. Henry just growls, do it and I'll hang you. So they don't. Instead, they try gentler cures, warm foot baths, pigeon blood salves, a paste made of ground mustard seeds and stale milk. You watch a woman with shaking hands smear it on his calves, hoping for a miracle. No miracle arrives. What does arrive is the chair. A new one, built wide, reinforced, fitted with wheels. Not a throne, not a seat of power. Just a chair. Because Henry can no longer stand long enough for council meetings, and on his worst days, he can't walk at all. He hates it. You can feel his shame burning through the cushion. Once he knocks it over in a rage and insists on crawling across the floor. Kings do not roll, he spits. His arms tremble as he pulls his massive body forward inch by inch. You want to help. You don't help. You've learned. That night he weeps quietly, not for the pain, but for the loss of movement. He used to dance, remember that? You do. He'd sweep across the ballroom in velvet doublets, spinning duchesses and snapping fingers. Now, he can't put on his own slippers. The music has stopped. You try to cheer him up. You read him war stories, tell him jokes, bring him gossip. He smiles sometimes, but mostly he stares at his feet like they're traitors. Then comes the explosion. Not literal, just emotional. One morning you walk in and find the room destroyed, furniture shattered, curtains torn, the tray of gout remedies splattered across the wall. Henry sits there, chest heaving, his good leg trembling. He says, I dreamt I was walking, running, and when I woke up. He doesn't finish. He doesn't need to. Later that week the swelling recedes slightly, enough for him to hobble a few feet. The court celebrates like he's conquered France again. You don't. You know better. It's not a recovery. It's a lull. Gout doesn't vanish. It waits. It simmers. And it always comes back worse. You begin to notice something else. His hands. They've started trembling during meals. Not from nerves. From joint damage. He's losing grip. You catch him dropping a fork. He kicks it away, pretending it was intentional. He can't sign letters easily anymore, can't write long notes without pain, so you start doing it for him. He dictates, you pen, and every so often his voice cracks. You don't ask if it's the pain. You know it's the pride. At night, he sometimes asks you, do you think it's punishment? You ask, for what? He doesn't answer. Just stares at his feet. You're kneeling on cold stone, folding towels soaked with blood. Behind you, the Queen is weeping quietly. Another miscarriage. The fourth this year. Henry hasn't spoken in hours. Peter looked up. You know his face is a furnace right now, burning with rage, guilt, confusion, all of it. This is what stress does to him. People think Henry's madness bloomed overnight, but you've watched it ferment, ripening through the years like meat left too long on the spit, and nothing ferments a soul like failure. He wanted a son, needed one, not just to carry the crown, but to validate his existence, to prove that God hadn't turned his back. But the sons die, or are never born. And one by one, the women fade under the weight of royal disappointment. First Catherine, then Anne, then Jane, then a flurry of others. Some wives, some not. And with each loss, Henry loses a little more of himself. He blames the women. Of course he does. They are not strong enough to carry a king's blood, he says once, while picking at roast quail. But he's the one pacing the hallways at 2 a.m. He's the one who screams into pillows. He's the one who can't look a newborn in the eye without flinching. And his body? It responds with fury. The stress ignites his inflammation. His skin reddens. His gut swells. The leg wound weeps thicker. The gout flares brighter. You can almost hear his organs screaming, "We can't do this anymore." Historians still argue whether Henry's physical collapse was caused more by injury or by the psychological toll of dynastic anxiety. Either way, you've seen what pressure does. It tightens his chest. It steals his breath. It makes his already short fuse microscopic. You remember the day Anne Boleyn lost her final child, a boy, stillborn. She lay pale on the bed, whispering apologies. Henry stood in the doorway, silent. For a full minute, then turned and walked out. The next morning he accused her of adultery. You don't know if he believed it. Maybe he did. Maybe he needed to. Because believing Anne betrayed him was easier than facing the truth. He might be the problem. Now you sit in his chambers while he drafts letters. Cold, brutal, punishing letters. To courtiers, to foreign kings, to bishops. He's bleeding his emotions into politics, and the strain is making him physically heavier, not just in weight, but in presence. Every step feels thunderous now. Every glance a threat. His back is hunched more than before, his breath short. He sweats during simple conversations, and sometimes, when he thinks no one's watching, he rubs his temples like they're on fire. But everyone is watching, especially the wives. You remember the moment he first met Anne of Cleves. He walked in expecting a painting come to life. What he got was a real woman, too real. Real nose, real teeth, real disappointment. "He looks like a Flanders mare," he muttered to you. You nodded. What else could you do? The marriage lasted 6 months. And each failed relationship carved something out of him. Not love. That wasn't really his problem. It was image. Legacy, control. The less control he had over his family, the more control he demanded over everything else. The court grew cold. Ministers were replaced like candle wicks. Anyone who whispered doubt about his health or mind or reproductive abilities, gone, vanished. Some to the tower, some to graves. The stress turned him into a volcano, always close to eruption. You watch a nobleman bow too slowly one evening. Henry narrows his eyes and snarls, "You mock me." The man faints on the spot. You can't blame him. And the palace? It's turning darker too. Tapestries are drawn more tightly. Doors stay shut longer. Laughter fades to murmurs. He still hosts banquets, still commands performances, still wears gold like it's armor. But no one's fooled. You watch him grip the arms of his throne like a drowning man clutches driftwood. Precious bechetted in those fingers. You walk with him to the nursery once, just to see the young Elizabeth. He smiles, weakly, and rests a trembling hand on her hair. She looks up with those sharp eyes, Anne's eyes, and he flinches. He turns to you and says, "She's clever, but she's not a son." You say nothing. You're there when Jane Seymour dies from childbirth fever. She gave him Edward, the longed-for heir. But the price? Too high. You see him sit beside her body for hours. No food, no wine, no words. When he finally stands, he's a different man. A shell wearing a crown. After that, everything speeds up. The marriages blur, the policies grow harsher. His health nosedives. You think about how the stress rewired him, from golden prince to bitter king, from handsome to horrifying, from legend to warning. And as you mop up the blood-soaked linens of yet another miscarriage, you realize something awful. This body, so swollen, so broken, so filled with rot, isn't just dying. It's summer, and the stink in the palace could stop your heart. You're helping Henry dress, if you can call it that. You're really just layering fabric over a failing body, trying to fool the world. The clothes are royal, gold-threaded doublets, wide velvet cloaks, gem-crusted caps. But underneath, it's a mess. He has to wear a corset now. Not for fashion, for containment. His belly has grown so large and heavy that it needs physical support. The tailor has had to modify every piece of clothing to include hidden laces, clasps, panels, like scaffolding for a collapsing structure. Even then, the seams groan when he moves. You wrap his leg wound in new linen. It's been weeping all night. You tried a new salve, made from egg whites, myrrh, and powdered antler, but the smell overpowers everything. Sweet, sharp, and sour, like fermented milk left under a bed. He stares into the mirror, silent. You're not sure what he sees. You know what you see: the swelling in his ankles, the purplish rings under his eyes, the patches of dry, flaking skin behind his ears. His neck bulges over the collar now. His royal boots have to be slit open at the ankles or else cut off after use. You once saw a boot removed with a knife. Blood followed. And still, he insists on looking perfect. Court fashion demands it. The image must hold. You walk into the throne room ahead of him to ensure the scent doesn't knock anyone out cold. Courtiers bow as he enters, but their eyes flicker. They see the sweat stains, the waddling gait, the way his servants quietly rotate scented cloths near the windows. He sits, and you hold your breath, because his new throne has been specially reinforced. The last one cracked under him, a terrifying crunch in the middle of a foreign ambassador's visit. The court never truly recovered. Historians still debate whether his obsession with fashion in these years was vanity or denial. You don't. You know it was both. He needed to look the part, because he knew, deep down, his body was a betrayal. He starts wearing massive padded shoulders, not just a style, against the truth. His robes are lined with fur even in summer, not because he's cold, but because the weight helps keep him steady, like sandbags in a storm. You've seen the preparation rituals, the perfumes, the beard combing, the strategic positioning of jewelry to hide neck lumps. It's less grooming, more construction, and still he stinks. You watch a duchess faint during mass, right as Henry passes. Everyone says she skipped breakfast. You know better. The smell of rot mixed with musk and rose oil is unforgettable. You've learned to ignore it, but some courtiers hold pomanders near their faces, tiny metal balls filled with herbs and spices. A subtle insult, one that Henry notices. He doesn't say anything. He just stares longer. You start to realize how much fear fashion conceals. Those fur-lined gloves, to hide trembling fingers. The enormous hat, to distract from his thinning hair. The codpiece, once a boast, is now so heavily padded it's more symbol than function. And behind closed doors, it's a different story. You help undress him at night. You see the soaked undershirts, the angry red rash under his arms, the infected sore near his spine. He groans with relief as the layers come off. His skin is shiny from ointments. His body creaks like old furniture. One night he whispers, "Do you think they still see me as a god?" You hesitate. Then you lie, of course. The truth? They see a man trapped in costume, a collapsing king disguised in velvet. But here's the thing. The fashion works, at least in public. Paintings from this period still show him towering, fierce, radiant. Wide-legged stance, hand on sword, face like thunder. He looks immortal. You were there when one of those portraits was painted. You watched the artist gently smooth out the folds of his robe, angle the shoulders higher, paint the eyes brighter. The real Henry sat slouched in a chair, nodding off from laudanum and leg pain. For the portrait, perfection. He later told the artist, "Make me timeless." And they did. We've grown used to the double reality. In public, the king in gold. In private, the man in bandages. And between the two, you, holding pins, tucking folds, changing linens. You've even developed a talent, arranging robes to cover leaks. A quick repositioning of a sash here, a well-placed chain there. You once used a fur stole to block an active leg bleed. Henry didn't even notice. He started ordering bigger chairs now, not for comfort, he's beyond that, but to accommodate the increasing width of his body. Courtiers joke about Henry-sized furniture, not where he can hear, of course. One night, while tightening his corset, he groans and mutters, "I used to leap over fences, now I'm carried like a roast." You don't answer, just finish tying the laces. And as you pull his cloak into place and step back, you see what everyone else sees. Puff. And as he turns and limps into the hall, you see what no one else does. A man being eaten alive by the very image he built is dark in the privy chamber, on purpose. You've pulled the tapestries over the windows and snuffed 2 of the candles. No one needs to see Henry like this, not today. You hear him before you see him, a rustling of cloth, a low grunt, then a shark bark. Where are they? You rush in with the bandages. The bleeding has started again. The leg wound has turned angry, red, puffy, with little yellow-white islands forming along the edge. And there's something new, a sharp odour, deeper than rot, like copper pennies left in a bowl of spoiled milk. You've gotten good at ranking his smells. This one, bad news. He doesn't look at you as you kneel, just stares at the fire, eyes narrowed. "Was it Seymour?" he says quietly. You blink. "Who, Your Majesty?" He jerks his chin. "I smell something treasonous." Oh, it's going to be one of those days. The paranoia has been building for years. You've watched it worm its way into his brain like rats in a granary. At first, it was subtle. Extra guards outside his door, letters opened and resealed. Now, it's wild-eyed fury. At shadows. He thinks his food is poisoned, that his bedchamber's been bugged, that France is hiding a bastard Tudor prince just waiting to invade. And it's not just the politics, it's everyone. Servants, bishops, musicians, anyone could be plotting. You once watched him interrogate a court jester about a joke involving a fat goose. "Was that supposed to be me?" he screamed, breath sour, eyes gleaming. The jester wet himself. Historians still argue whether this paranoia came from their head injury, chronic pain, or the psychological toll of rule. But you think it's his body. Because when a man starts rotting from the inside, he assumes everything else is too. You finish cleaning the leg, carefully removing a flap of skin that peels like old wallpaper. He flinches, then says, "You would tell me if someone meant to harm me, wouldn't you?" You nod. "Of course." He narrows his eyes. "Good. Because if you lied, I'd smell it on you." And just like that, he's laughing. A low, rattling chuckle. You laugh too, because what else do you do when the King of England says he can sniff out betrayal? He's more isolated than ever now. Doesn't trust his council, doesn't trust his wives. Sometimes you wonder if he even trusts himself. He'll sign an order in the morning and burn it by nightfall. He has guards follow his own guards. You once watched him check under a cushion for a knife. His private meals are tested by 2 tasters before they reach his lips. Not just for poison, he thinks people are slipping sorcery into the gravy. You remember when a cook was executed for using the devil's spice? Cinnamon. You can't make this stuff up. But here's the twisted part. The more paranoid he gets, the more powerful he becomes. Because fear makes people obey. His courtiers are terrified. They nod at everything. They praise his decisions before he's even finished speaking. You've heard one minister say yes to a question about taxes before it was asked. And that power, it feeds his suspicion. Like when he starts accusing Queen Catherine Howard, his fifth wife, of adultery. At first it's whispers, then a letter. Then suddenly, full-blown investigation, guards, confessions, executions. And you know she was guilty. Probably, maybe. But also, maybe not. You remember the day she was dragged from court? Henry didn't look at her, just sat in his chair, hands trembling, face blank. When she screamed his name, something behind his eyes flickered, but he didn't move. The next day he orders a new bed. And the day after that, he accuses his physician of reading too much. There was something fragile in him now, like a cracked window, waiting to shatter. You've seen him burst into laughter, then fury, then tears, all in the same sentence. One time, he asked if you'd ever seen a ghost. "Because I think I did," he said. "It looked like me, but thinner." That night he refused to sleep, just sat up in bed, sword across his lap, watching the door. You stayed awake with him, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. He didn't speak again until dawn. Then he whispered, "Everyone wants to take something from me." You shook your head. He looked at you, eyes wild. "Already are." And honestly, he's right. The ministers are maneuvering, the heirs are young, the alliances are brittle. His own body is turning against him, piece by piece. You change the bandages again. He winces. "That hurts," he says. You nod. "I know." But deep down you also know this. Henry's real wound isn't the leg, it's the loneliness. The gnawing fear that he's surrounded not by courtiers, but by crows. Wait, the chair groans under his weight. You hear it every time he shifts. The thick wooden frame, custom built and reinforced with iron bands, creaks like a storm-tossed ship. Henry grunts, not from exertion, from shame. He can no longer walk on his own. The leg wound has deepened again, flesh has died, the gout has returned in both feet. And his weight? It's crushing. Some whisper he's over 400 pounds now. You don't know the exact number, but you've carried enough of him to guess. This is the age of the golden chair. You helped build it. Well, you didn't hammer the parts, but you watched the carpenter take precise measurements. The seat is wider than a bathtub. The wheels are heavy. The cushion is stuffed with goose down and herbs to mask the stink. The armrests? Polished, because Henry grips them so hard, his fingers sometimes leave bruises. It's not a throne, not even close. A throne is symbolic. This chair is functional. He eats it. He refuses to call it what it is. He says it's a travelling throne, or a thinking chair. But you've seen the truth in his eyes when he's wheeled across the hall like a sack of potatoes. Embarrassment, rage, grief. You remember the first time he tried to stand after a full day in the chair? His foot didn't respond. He screamed so loud the dogs started barking in the courtyard. He collapsed, not gracefully, not quietly, like a statue being pushed off a pedestal. Historians still argue whether his mobility issues were solely gout or also compounded by degenerative joint disease, diabetes and obesity. Nerve damage. Whatever the cause, you know the result. Henry doesn't rise anymore. And yet, he pretends. You've watched the elaborate performance unfold dozens of times. He's wheeled into the chamber, cloaked in velvet and fox fur. Just before the doors open, he straightens his back, lifts his chin, and grips the chair arms like they're part of him. He commands from that chair. People still bow, people still shake when he glares, because power, true power, doesn't need legs, it just needs presence. And Henry still has plenty of that. You watch ministers shrink under his gaze, bishops fumble their words, ambassadors stammer. No one dares mention the fact that the King of England can't walk to the window without help. But behind the scenes, it's harder to ignore. He needs 2 men to help him relieve himself. You are one of them. The urinal, a long pewter tube, is hidden in a carved chest. You've held it while he sighed, groaned, and once recited scripture through gritted teeth. You've wiped sweat from his neck as he tried to reach down and couldn't. No malignity here, just necessity. He has an elevated commode now, with handrails. Sometimes he needs to be lifted onto it. You know how to brace under his arm, lift with your legs, not your back. You've heard his joints crack like dry twigs. Once, the whole commode tipped. He howled in rage, and then demanded everyone clear the room. Everyone but you. He clutched your arm and said, "Burn it." You did, the whole wooden frame, gone by dusk. He has special slippers now too, lined with lambskin, extra wide, but his feet have grown so swollen and distorted that nothing really fits. So he stays barefoot most days, under layers of blankets, barking orders while his toes twitch in pain. And yet, he still dresses from the waist up like a war god. The robes, the chains, the feathered hats. You once helped him into a bejeweled coat so heavy it left bruises on his shoulders, but he wore it all day. Because people can't fear what they pity. You see how careful his inner circle has become. No one walks too fast in front of him. No one looks too long at his legs. Everything is slow to match his pace. Even the court musicians play softer now, less rhythm, less bounce. You think it's subconscious, or fear. He notices it all. One afternoon, a courtier brings him a gift, a gilded walking stick, elegant, engraved, thoughtful. Henry smashes it against the fireplace. "I do not limp," he snarls. The man is gone the next morning. You never learn where. Another time, a servant makes the mistake of asking if His Majesty would like assistance to the garden. "I don't need help," he hisses. "I need loyalty." It's not about the chair. It's about what the chair means. That his body, once the envy of Europe, is now just furniture. That the throne, the real one, is slipping away beneath him. He starts refusing foreign visits, cancels events, holds council in his bedroom. When he must be seen in public, everything is staged. Ramps instead of steps, cushions pre-placed, pages trained to catch him if he tips. One day you catch him staring at a suit of armor hanging on the wall. His old armor, slim-waisted, gleaming. He doesn't say a word. But later that night, he orders it removed. "Polish it," he says, "then lock it away." You do. And as the years grind forward, the man who once raced horses and broke lances becomes a man who cannot stand to be left alone for more than 5 minutes. Not out of fear, but because if he falls, he may never get up again. You hesitate before opening the door. It's the smell, always the smell. It slips through the cracks of the chamber like a warning, sweet and sour, earthy and wet, like spoiled meat wrapped in rosemary. You've burned sage, lavender, even tar. Nothing works. You step inside. Henry is in bed, shirtless, the sheets pushed down to his waist. His skin glistens with oil and sweat. The bandages on his leg have bled through, again. A deep, coppery stain spreads like an ink blot across the linen. But that's not the worst of it. It's the pressure ulcers, bed sores, boils, whatever word you pick, it doesn't match what you see. His flesh is breaking down. You lift the edge of the sheet and reveal a patch of skin near his tailbone that has split open, purple at the edges, yellow at the center, and wet. This is what happens when a body stays still too long. You can't lie on his back without pain, can't sit without cushioning. His bedding has to be changed every few hours, and the padding beneath him, herbs, straw, wool, is soaked through with sweat and fluids you no longer try to identify. You wonder, quietly, if this is what dying slowly feels like. He winces when you touch him. "Gentle," he whispers. His voice is hoarse, like something's been scraping his throat in his sleep. You glance at the nightstand. 3 goblets, all half drunk. One of wine, one of warm ale, One of some herbal infusion the physician swears will draw out the corruption. You lift his leg gently to rewrap the dressing. Pus oozes onto your glove. You say nothing. The room reeks. The body in the bed is the same one that once rode into battle like a god, that once danced for hours at court, that once fathered heirs and struck down rivals. Now it can barely support itself. You remember when the first bed sores appeared. They were small, red, angry. They came and went. But then the fever came, the sleeping for 16 hours a day, the refusal to turn. Now the sores are a map of where he's been, immobile, unhealed, and full of pain. Historians still argue whether he had undiagnosed diabetes, chronic infection, or circulatory failure. You don't argue. You live it. Every day you peel cloth from skin that sticks like glue. He drifts in and out of sleep while you work. Sometimes he mutters, names, orders. Once, he mumbled something about Anne, not Anne Boleyn, just Anne. You're not even sure which one anymore. The chamber is quiet, but there's always movement. Servants tread carefully. Candles are replaced quickly to mask the smell. Pages fan the air gently. The windows are cracked, even in winter. No one lingers. One afternoon, a court musician is sent in to play the lute beside the bed. The man gets through 3 verses before retching and rushing out. You offer to finish the song. Henry declines. He closes his eyes and says, "Just don't let the flies settle." They haven't yet, but you've noticed them buzzing outside the window more often. The bed itself is reinforced, extra wide, with posts strong enough to support a full-grown ox, but even it sags in the middle. The mattress dips where his body rests. He complains that it feels like sinking. You don't tell him that's exactly what's happening. The decay is spreading, slowly but clearly. You noticed a darkening around the wound on his hip. It wasn't there last week. The physician says it's just stagnant blood. You think it's something else, something worse. He's become nocturnal. Awake through the night, asleep most of the day. He stares at the ceiling, silent for hours. Once, you caught him counting, 1 to 100. Then starting over, his fingers twitched with each number. You asked what he was doing. He said, keeping time. One evening he asks to see a priest, not for confession, just to talk. They sit together for nearly an hour. No one speaks of what was said, but afterward Henry asks for wine, not to drink. Wash the leg. You do it. You watch the dark red liquid run down his calf like a funeral offering. He doesn't flinch, just exhales, long and slow. The swords are now part of the room, like furniture, like the smell. And yet he still wears his rings, still has his signet beside the bed, still asks to be announced when someone enters. Because even from bed, even soaked in rot, he's still the king. He once told you, a man is not his body, he is his crown. You didn't respond, but deep down you wondered. What happens when the body finally wins? It's just after midnight when the knock comes at your chamber door. 3 soft taps, too soft for a guard, too late for a servant. You open it to find Lady Rochford standing there, pale and shaky, clutching a bundle wrapped in cloth. From a healer, she whispers, not one of the kings. Inside the cloth, a paste, thick, greenish, smells like chicken fat, lavender and something burned. There's also a small packet of powder labelled unicorn horn, which is not. You already know tonight is going to be weird. This is what desperation looks like. The king has given up on his official doctors. He now calls in every fringe, foreign and possibly fictional healer within 100 miles. Alchemists, herbalists, midwives who whisper in Welsh, a toothless man from Cornwall who claims he can talk pain out of the skin. Henry let him chant for a full hour while flies buzz around the leg wound. The pain didn't leave. The mug did. But you don't blame Henry. Nothing's working. So now the court dips into superstition. They try everything. Oils pressed from black lilies, ointments made of crushed pearls, ground stag antler mixed with goat's blood. You once caught someone heating a poultice over a candle and muttering in Latin. You're not even sure they knew Latin. Tonight's treatment? Smear the chicken fat paste on the wound and sprinkle the unicorn powder into the bandages. Then wrap with linen soaked in red wine. Why red wine? Because white invites demons. That's the actual explanation. You do it anyway. Henry flinches when the paste touches raw flesh, but he says nothing, just grips the sides of the bed and stares at the ceiling like he's willing it to disappear. You sit beside him as he drifts into a half-sleep, and you study the tray of fringe remedies piling up at the foot of the bed. A vial of quicksilver, a lump of amber soaked in vinegar, even a scrap of parchment with a charm written on it. Let rot flee the flesh of the lion, and let the crown remain. Historians still argue whether Henry truly believed in these cures, or just tolerated them as distractions. But you've seen the way he watches, the way he asks questions, the way he stares at the ointment jars like they might contain salvation. One day he insists on something new, something darker. Not openly, of course. He can't be seen embracing sorcery, not after having people executed for it. But behind closed doors, the whispers grow. He asks you, do you know if there are women in Kent who still speak to the old gods? You pause. Yes. He nods. Bring one. So you do. She arrives hooded, silent. She kneels by the bed and touches the bandages without flinching. Her fingers are cold. She smells like pine needles and smoke. Henry watches her like a man staring down fate. She mutters in a language you don't recognize, lights a small candle, places it near the leg. Then she spits on the flame. You nearly jump. Henry doesn't move. She leans in, whispers something in his ear. He nods. Then she's gone. No one speaks of it. But afterward he sleeps for 8 straight hours, for the first time in weeks. The court blames the wine. The physician says, herbs finally balanced the humours. You and Henry both know it wasn't that. Next week he asks for her again. You say she vanished, which is true. No one's seen her since. The fringe treatments keep coming. One man brings powdered mummy, real or fake, who knows, said to draw out death itself. Another tries blue glass tincture made from melted windows. Henry drinks it, immediately throws it up. He doesn't complain. He just tries the next thing. You've noticed a new habit. He rubs talismans between his fingers. Once a St. Christopher medal, once a dried toad's foot. He says nothing, just keeps them close, as if something might shield him from whatever hell his body has become. The worst moment? The night they suggest trepanning. That's skull drilling. Release the corrupted air, the healer says. Balance the humours, let the pain escape. You argue, loudly. Henry looks at you exhausted and says, if it comes to that, wait until I'm asleep. He doesn't go through with it, but he doesn't rule it out either. And that's where things now stand. The King of England is being held together by superstition, lies and chicken fat. He no longer trusts medicine. He no longer trusts God. He only trusts trying anything. Sometimes you think it's not about curing the body. It's about outrunning death, one desperate ritual at a time. And every morning when you unrack the leg and smell what's inside, you know he's losing that race. You're standing by the window staring out into the fog when he asks it again. Though I have? You turn. He's lying back, shirt open, bandages crusted over, face sunken. Not just with weight loss. There's something else now. Something hollow. The kind of hollow that doesn't fill back in. And you don't know what to say, because honestly, no one really does. They've called it everything over the years. a humoral imbalance, sorrow of the spleen, torment of the joints, infection of divine judgment. That's the polite way to say we have no idea. But lately, there's been talk of something different, something darker, a syphilitic rot. The whisper came from a physician visiting from Venice. He studied Henry's symptoms for just an hour, then left, muttering about the French disease. You watched Henry boil with rage when he heard, nearly had the man locked in the stocks. He insists it's not that, says his virtues are too many for such sin. But in the quiet moments, you wonder. He has the signs, skin lesions that come and go, sudden madness, then lucidity, eye problems, hair loss, the leg of course, and other parts he doesn't talk about. Some nights, when you're helping him dress, he winces at the slightest touch near his groin. He says it's the gout. You don't push. But you notice he doesn't use the commode alone anymore. Then again, it could be something else. Cushing's disease, diabetes, advanced osteomyelitis. Scholars today toss around these names like they're dice, rolling them across the centuries. No diagnosis sticks. But one thing is clear, he's coming apart. The weight gain is relentless. Despite the infection, the pain, the swelling, he continues to eat like it's a duty. His torso is ballooning, round and rigid. His arms, bloated, but weaker. His hands tremble when he lifts a goblet. Sometimes he can't hold a spoon. Other times his temper flares so fast it's like lightning. You watched him strike a servant in the face with a crust of bread. He was chewing too loud, Henry muttered, as if that explained everything. And his eyes? Yellowed, bloodshot, pupils uneven. You've seen them dart, unfocused. He speaks to people who aren't there. You remember the worst night. He wakes up gasping, clutching his chest. You rush to his side, thinking, this is it. He's sweating, breath rattling, skin cold and damp. Then he grips your wrist and says, the moon is inside me. You freeze. He repeats it, softer. It's moving through my belly like a rat. You try to calm him, but he's somewhere else, somewhere far. That same night he insists on writing a letter to God, dictates it aloud, says, tell him I'll trade the crown for peace, then tears the page in half and laughs until he coughs blood. You wonder if he even remembers the next morning. The truth? He might have everything, or nothing, or things we don't even have names for. His body has become a laboratory of failure, every system collapsing in sequence. You find a list once, scribbled in shaky handwriting on his desk. The league, the buck, the fire in my joints, the shadow in my mind, the swelling, the sleep, the stink, the silence. Underneath, in a different hand, the word curse. He asks for that list daily now, wants to keep track. I want to know what's killing me, he says. But he doesn't really want to know, because knowing means facing that this is more than one disease. It's a total failure of being. You hear the new rumors. Some say he's being punished for the deaths of his wives. Others say he was cursed by monks when he destroyed the monasteries. One servant claims she saw the leg wound glow at night. You laugh at that, but quietly, because you've seen stranger things. You once touched the wound and felt it pulse. And there's something else now. His skin has started peeling in places, flakes like dry parchment. He scratches constantly. One day, he pulls back a glove and stares at his palm for a full minute before whispering, "That's not mine." He meant the hand. You hope he meant the hand. Even his dreams are changing. He speaks aloud in sleep. Names, orders, apologies. Sometimes he mutters nonsense. The water runs backward. Or, the sun has teeth. You lie awake listening, cataloguing madness. It's hard to say what he has, but it's easy to say what he is. Deeply, in every part, mind, blood, flesh, soul. You tell him, it might not be one thing. He nods, it might be everything. And then, almost too softly to hear, or maybe it's just being king. It's cold. Hearth fire's been stoked 3 times, and still the chill clings to everything. Stone, glass, skin. You wrap a wool shawl around your shoulders as you enter the royal bedchamber. It's not just the draft. It's death. Henry is dying. No one says it. No one dares. But the signs are everywhere. The silences, the half-whispered prayers, the way his dogs have gone quiet. Even the guards seem to move slower now, like the palace is mourning in advance. He hasn't stood in days, hasn't eaten solid food in 2, just wine, broth, and tiny spoonfuls of sugared milk. His voice comes in short bursts now, hoarse and low, barely louder than the wind pressing against the windows. You move closer to the bed. He's pale. His skin, what's left of it, looks stretched over bone and bloated muscle. His belly rises like a dome under the blanket, too firm, too round. His arms lie at his sides, limp, hands twitching once in a while like they're chasing something in a dream. He opens his eyes. I hear them building the tomb. He nods. He already ordered it years ago, at St. George's Chapel, Windsor. Shared with Jane Seymour, the only wife he said he truly loved. Or maybe just the only one who gave him a son. I want to be remembered as I was, he says. You lie again, gently. You will be. You turn to change the dressing on his leg, and that's when you see it. The linen isn't just wet. It's soaked through. Blood, pus, something darker, something thicker. You press gently. The skin collapses inward like wet clay. This is not just rot anymore. So, liquefaction. The flesh is breaking down into fluid. Historians still argue whether he died of kidney failure, septicemia, congestive heart failure, or all of them combined. But right now, in this room, all you know is that his body is failing in slow motion, and it's starting from the inside out. Later that day, you help the physician perform what's called a gentle bleeding, just a few ounces, supposedly to ease the heat. You know it's superstition. Henry barely reacts when the blade slices his arm. The blood is slow, thick, almost purple. He stares at it and mutters, "Looks like wine." If you want to tell him it smells worse. You stay through the night. He moans in his sleep, clutching the sheets, mumbling phrases you can't piece together. Once, he yells a name, Anne, and you still don't know which one. Maybe he doesn't either. Sometime after midnight, his breathing falters. You panic. You summon the physician, the priest's 2 pages. You stand around the bed in tense silence, watching as his chest rises and falls like a stormy tide. You think it might stop at any moment. Then, suddenly, a breath, a deep one, long and ragged. He survives the night, but he's slipping. The next day they bring the coffin. Not into the room, just into the next chamber. The scent of fresh wood and resin seeps under the door. It's massive, reinforced. The joiners worked day and night to finish it. Everyone remembers what happened last time. Because there's another story, a true one. After Henry died, his body began to bloat. Fast. So fast, in fact, that when they transported his corpse to Windsor, the coffin, though sealed, leaked. At one point it burst. Contemporary accounts say liquid seeped from the seams, dripping onto the chapel floor. A dog, one of the strays that roamed the cloisters, licked the puddle before being shooed away. The courtiers tried to cover the smell with incense. They claimed it was oil or holy water, or nothing at all. But everyone remembers it. Henry, King of England, supreme head of the church, defender of the faith, leaked on the way to his grave. Some say that's divine justice. Others say it's just biology. You say it's both. But back in this moment, before the funeral, before the bursting, you look down at a man who was once so proud of his body, his strength, his size. his presence. Now his skin is cracked, his breath smells like sweetmeat turned bad. His eyelids flutter without rhythm. He can barely hold a goblet. And yet, his grip on life remains stubborn. He murmurs, "Do you think I've won?" You don't know what he means. The wars, the church, the crown, the wives. You lie again. Yes. He nods, barely. And that night, when you check on him again, you hear something new. Silence. Real silence. No breathing, no moaning, just the creak of the bed as you lean in to make sure. He's gone. It's quiet for a long moment. Then the physician gently closes the king's eyes. No final words, no flash of glory, just the end of a long, agonizing decline. You step back. The king is dead, but the smell remains. You don't sleep the night Henry dies. No one does. The palace is heavy with silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of torches and the soft steps of people pretending they aren't terrified. You sit just outside his chamber, with a cloth pressed to your face, not for tears, for the stench. The body is already turning. It's swelling faster than anyone expected. You peek in once and recoil. His stomach has ballooned, his skin has taken on a greenish tinge near the neck, and worst of all, the seepage. From the wound, from the mouth, from everywhere. The undertakers arrive before dawn. They don't speak, just bow their heads and get to work. You hear them arguing quietly over whether to remove the nightshirt or not. They decide not to. It's fused to the skin. The body is cleaned, sort of. Perfumed cloths, powdered herbs, layers of rose oil, but nothing covers the smell. You can still catch it in the folds of your own sleeves. They moved fast. There's no embalming, no removal of organs. The king had forbidden it. "I am whole," he once said. "I go to God as I am." You remember that as they hoist the swollen corpse into the coffin. His foot catches the side. They push harder. There's a tearing sound. Not of cloth. You look away. He's placed in a lead-lined wooden casket, sealed with pitch. The lid is nailed down with gold-tipped spikes. Royal, even now. But still, leaking. You can already see a dark ring forming around the seam, where the lid meets the base. They carry the coffin to the great hall for temporary display. Draped in black, topped with a golden crown and a jeweled sword. Courtiers shuffle in, bowing, weeping, whispering, but everyone keeps their distance. Too far to smell. Too far to hear the groaning. Because yes, there's a sound, faint, rhythmic. The wood is expanding, shifting. Something inside is bubbling. One of the servants says it's His Majesty sighing in spirit. You know better. The gases are building. By the third day, it's clear they have to move him now, before the coffin does something unroyal. The funeral procession is planned quickly, from Whitehall to Windsor, with pauses along the way. Not for ceremony, for damage control. You walk beside the cart. It's draped in black cloth, drawn by 6 black horses, accompanied by clerics and lords in mourning robes. And still, despite the pomp, there's that odour. It trails behind like a curse. The streets are lined with people. They fall silent as the coffin passes. Some cross themselves, some cry. But many, they hold kerchiefs to their faces. One boy shouts, "Long live King Edward." And just like that, the crowd moves on. They stop in Sion Abbey overnight. The coffin is placed in the choir, a cool room, high ceilings, peaceful, until the morning, when the monks report a pool of fluid beneath the casket. Dark, viscous, smelling of meat and mildew. They try to scrub it before anyone notices. You notice. The dog does too. Yes, that dog, the one from the records. Stray, mangy, thin. It wanders in during cleanup and laps at the edge of the stain before a monk shoos it off, horrified. It's not a myth. You were there. No one ever speaks of it again. By the time they reach Windsor, the coffin is heavier, the cart sinks deeper into the muddy road, the undertakers grunt more with every movement. You see one of them mutter something under his breath. A prayer, maybe, or a curse. Inside St. George's Chapel, the tomb awaits. If it's not ready. You'd think after all these years of planning it would be, but Henry always postponed its completion. Changed his mind, changed the artist, changed the design, changed everything. So the final burial site? A plain vault under the choir. No statue, no towering monument, just a hole, and a man inside a leaking coffin. They lower him in beside Jane Seymour. No music, just shuffling shoes and muttered instructions. Someone drops a candle. It hisses on the stone floor and rolls away. The priest stammers through the rites. His voice cracks on the Lord's Prayer. Maybe from emotion, maybe from the smell. You're not sure. You're standing beside the tomb when the lid finally disappears into the vault. And that's it. King Henry VIII is buried. For the floor, under the stone, under centuries of myth, legend, and a few inches of bad history. You step back. You wait for something. Light, thunder, a sigh from heaven. Nothing comes. Just the sound of nails being hammered back into the chapel door. Later, as the mourners leave, you hear a knight mutter, "Imagine dying like that, after living like that." You want to answer, but you don't. Because what is there to say? The greatest king of his age died bloated, broken, and leaking into his own casket. And somehow, he's still not done. You don't leave Windsor right away. You linger, for hours, maybe because it's hard to believe it's really over. Maybe because you're waiting for something, anything, to make it all make sense. But instead, the chapel is silent. Henry's gone, buried, entombed beside Jane, the only one of his 6 wives spared from either scandal, divorce, or execution. And you're left standing in a building built on contradiction. Because for a man who tried so hard to control his legacy, Henry left behind nothing but wreckage. You remember all of them. Catherine of Aragon, noble and unbending, married to Henry for over 20 years. She aged while he wandered. When she failed to produce a male heir, he cast her aside like spoiled meat. She died alone in a cold castle, still calling herself queen. Her daughter, Mary, survived, but barely. Anne Boleyn, sharp as a blade and just as dangerous. She gave him Elizabeth, a daughter too clever for her time, but failed to produce a son. So he invented treason, whispers of incest, witchcraft, anything to justify her death. You were there the day her head hit the straw. You saw the way Henry smiled at dinner that night. Less joy, more relief. Jane Seymour, quiet and dutiful. She gave him Edward, the only male heir to survive. Then she died 12 days later from childbirth fever. Henry mourned her more than the rest. Or maybe he mourned the idea of her, the perfect wife who didn't live long enough to displease him. Anne of Cleves, kind, clever, but too unattractive for the king's vanity. You remember the way he looked at her portrait, then looked at the real woman, and recoiled like someone handed him a warm fish. He had the marriage annulled, called her sister after. She outlived him all the same. Catherine Howard, young and radiant, and deeply unready for court life. She danced, she laughed, and yes, she strayed. But when the charges came, they came fast. You watched her dragged through the halls. She screamed for mercy. Henry didn't even flinch. Catherine Parr, the survivor. She nursed him, soothed him, kept him from self-destruction. She read to him when he couldn't hold a book. She endured, quietly, until his death. And after, she remarried, quickly, boldly. You think Henry might have admired that? If he hadn't been dead. 6 wives, 2 beheaded, 2 divorced, 1 dead in childbirth, 1 outlived him. Historians still debate what Henry's marriages say about him. Were they political maneuvers, emotional collapses, or just collateral damage from a man so terrified of death and failure that he burned everything around him to stay in control? You don't need a scholar to answer that. You watched it happen. You saw the toll. Every failed marriage took a piece of him, left scars not on his skin but in his mind. Every disappointment, every stillborn heir, every broken promise hardened him, turned him colder, angrier, sicker. He thought having sons would make him immortal. Instead, he built a kingdom of ghosts. You visit the gallery at Whitehall a few weeks later. All his portraits are still there, blooming, regal, untouched by disease. A man in gold, legs wide, arms broad, eyes fierce. You stand beneath one of the Holbein masterpieces and look up at that painted face, knowing exactly what's under the surface. Boils, blood, bone grinding against bone. Rot, hiding under ermine. You wonder what each wife would say if they saw this now, if they'd laugh, or cry, or just shake their heads and whisper, "We told you so." Catherine of Aragon would probably quote scripture. Anne Boleyn would raise a single eyebrow. Jane Seymour would say nothing. Anne of Cleves might chuckle politely. Catherine Howard wouldn't understand the tragedy. And Catherine Parr, she'd write a book. The irony? They're remembered too, each of them. Not just as footnotes, not just as cautionary tales, but as women who survived, some for years, some just long enough to make history flinch. Even now, centuries later, school children learn the rhyme: divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. VIII. Simple, but wrong. It leaves out what really happened, how each of them was worn down by a man who couldn't control his own body, so he tried to control theirs. You walk the palace one last time, brushing your hand along the cold walls. You pass the nursery, the Queen's quarters, the gardens where Anne once walked, barefoot in the dew. You think of all the women who had to smile in the presence of a man falling apart, had to bear his temper, his weight, his sickness, his demands, not because they loved him, but because they had no choice. And yet, here you are. He's gone. They remain. In memory, in legend, in truth. One of them gave birth to the future. One of them survived. And all of them, in some strange way, outlived the man who believed he was eternal. You follow the echoes of steps down a long, cold hallway, past locked doors, empty rooms, broken beams. You're in the remains of a monastery, or at least what's left after Henry decided to tear the church to shreds with his bare, sausage-thick fingers. This isn't about wives anymore, it's about faith, or the version of it he allowed to survive. You remember how it started? The Pope refused to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, so Henry said, "Fine," and made himself head of the Church of England. Just like that. One man, one crown, one law. And then? He broke the system. You were there when the royal commissioners arrived at abbeys with sealed letters and smug faces. Monks wept. Nuns hid valuables under their beds. Crucifixes were yanked from walls. Altars stripped. Chalices stolen. Statues smashed. Candles snuffed out, one by one. The dissolution of the monasteries, they called it. It sounded clinical. It was chaos. Stone by stone, England's spiritual backbone was pulled apart and sold for parts. Gold went to the crown, land went to nobles, and Henry? He grinned like a butcher. Every abbey that fell was another brick in his new empire. But it wasn't just politics, it was personal. He believed the church had betrayed him, that God had been held hostage in Rome. So he burned everything that reminded him of weakness, of waiting, of no. Historians still argue whether he truly believed in Protestantism or simply wanted to punish the Catholic Church. You think he believed in whatever let him stay in control? Even as his body failed, His ego soared. You remember one day, not long after the destruction began, he called for a new title. Supreme Head of the Church of England. He made it official, printed it on coins, banners, proclamations. He wore it like armor. A man dying of infection, wearing God's crown. You've walked through the rubble of dozens of priories, smelt the burnt hymnals, seen the paint scraped off frescoes. You once picked up a stone from a demolished nave and saw a child's prayer scratched into it. Lord, keep father safe. You wondered if that child ever knew their father came home to ruins. And here's the irony. Henry's war on the church left England fractured, faith twisted into politics. And yet, he still prayed, still clutched his crucifix when his leg throbbed, still muttered, "Forgive me," when the fever came on too strong. He dismantled faith brick by brick, and then begged it for mercy in the dark. You saw it most clearly during the executions. Thomas More, devout, brilliant, stubborn, stood his ground, refused to sign the Act of Supremacy. So Henry cut off his head. "You must be loyal," Henry said, "or be silent forever." You watched him say it, with his infected leg trembling beneath the table. Thomas Cromwell, his right-hand man for the dissolution, was also eventually killed. Too powerful, too useful, too dangerous. The blade of paranoia never rested long. And through it all, churches burned, libraries were gutted, choirs fell silent. All because one man couldn't stomach being told no. But then, near the end, you notice something change. The Bible on his nightstand, open to Psalms, an old rosary tucked in his drawer, half hidden under silk socks. When you asked, he growled, "Relics are for cowards," but he never threw them out. You think he feared death more than he feared hell, and in his final days that fear warped into something like reverence, not for God, but for legacy. He wanted the appearance of piety, just enough to be buried in white linen and remembered kindly. He ordered prayers said in every church, those he hadn't demolished, for the soul of the king. He asked the priests to tell the people, "I die in the faith of Christ, not Rome." You read that line over and over, because even in death, he was still picking sides. You walk now through what used to be Waltham Abbey, one of the last monasteries standing when Henry began his purge. The roof is gone, the walls cracked, birds nest in the rafters, but the foundation is solid. A lot like his church. Broken, but still here. Somewhere beneath your feet lie monks who begged for mercy, nuns who fled in the night, families who watched their holy places turned into granaries, stables, armories. And yet England moved on. Protestant, then Catholic, then Protestant again. And in the middle of that spinning wheel, Henry's ghost. The man who took a country's soul and sold it back to itself in fragments. The man who replaced God with a mirror. And every time you walk through the ruins of a chapel, you hear the echo of his voice, still trying to sound divine. You're back in the palace gallery. Same portraits, same velvet curtains. But something feels different now. It's quieter, emptier, and somehow louder in your head. You're surrounded by images of Henry in his prime, sharp beard, wide stance, hand on sword, eyes like daggers. They all lie. You've been inside that body, held the bandages, smelled the rot, watched the king shrink, scream, swell, burst. And now you're surrounded by art that says, nothing happened. You step closer to one painting. It's the famous Holbein, Henry mid-stride in his power pose, taking up nearly the whole canvas. You stare into his painted eyes and wonder, did anyone ever see the real man? Or did they only see what he wanted them to? Because if history has a mouth, it's full of half-truths. You hear the rumors now, echoing louder than ever, that he died a brave king, a great reformer, a misunderstood lover, a tyrant who did what was needed, or maybe a tragic soul who broke under the pressure of power. Everyone has their version. Netflix makes him smolder. Textbooks make him simple. Tour guides skip the smell. But you know better. You remember the tremors in his fingers, the blood in his boots, the curses whispered at midnight. You remember the leg wound, the soaked sheets, the flies. You remember the crack in his voice when he asked, "Do you think I'm still a man?" Historians still argue over who Henry VIII really was. Some paint him as a Renaissance lion, brilliant, charismatic, visionary. Others say he was a monster, narcissistic, paranoid, destructive. But here's the truth. He was both, and neither. Because Henry didn't just rewrite England's religion or royal succession, he rewrote himself. Again and again, from scholar to warrior, lover to executioner, saint to villain, king to corpse. You see it in the records. One document lists him as Henry the Invincible, another calls him Henry the Cruel. One ambassador called him a man of divine majesty. Another described him as a rotting bear who howls when he's bored. All of them were right, and none of them were. Even the stories about his death split down the middle. Some say he died whispering prayers. Others say he cursed his God. Some claim his last word was Jane. Others insist he said, "Let none weep." One version has him exploding in his coffin. Another says he simply faded. The truth? Probably a messy mix of all of them. That's how history works. It leaks, it festers, it gets repainted. You walk past another portrait, this one softer, Henry seated, holding a book, younger, thoughtful. It reminds you he wasn't always the monster. There was a time when he loved music, when he laughed easily, when he studied scripture and kissed his wife's hand and dreamed of peace. There was tenderness in him, once, before the rot, before the fear. And that's the part most people forget. Because it's easier to remember the tyrant than to admit the tyrant hurt. You turn a corner and find a display of royal artifacts. His writing box, one of his rings, a feathered hat, all perfectly preserved, clean, gleaming. No pus stains, no burn marks, no smell. You reach into your pocket and pull out a folded scrap of parchment. The last thing he wrote before his final decline. Just one line. "I was fire, now I am smoke." No signature, no seal. Just a quiet confession from a man who could no longer hold his own goblet. You leave it behind on the pedestal. Let someone else find it. Let someone else guess what it means. Because, you know, you've always known. Henry VIII wasn't just a king who married 6 women and split from Rome. He was a man who spent his life outrunning death, and eventually, death outran him. He was pain wrapped in velvet, pride soaked in wine, a legend with leaking bandages. And the only thing more powerful than his crown was the fear of losing it. You return one final time to the chapel at Windsor. It's quiet here, thick quiet, the kind that settles over stone like dust, the kind that doesn't move when you breathe. The tomb lies beneath your feet, plain and unnoticed. No statue, no stained glass halo, just a slab. Henry VIII, buried next to Jane Seymour. No more titles, no glowing epitaph, just a name and silence. You step closer. The air smells clean now, cold. Not because the rot is gone, but because time has scoured it away, scrubbed the stink from memory, left behind only the version history wanted to keep. For you remember everything. You remember the man before the fall, the golden prince, muscles like marble, calves that inspired sonnets. He had laughter in his lungs and music in his blood. The boy king who loved tennis, poetry and horseback rides through misty fields. And you remember the undoing. The screams, the ulcers, the stench that clung to your clothes even after 3 washings. The terror in his eyes as his world shrank to a single infected leg and a dozen bandages that never stayed clean. He died surrounded by gold and power, and still utterly alone. You touch the stone, cool, smooth, unmoved by all that passed above it. Beneath lies a man once called the Lion of England, a man who burned wives, broke churches, bled from every corner of himself, a man who wanted so badly to live forever that he destroyed everything that dared remind him he wouldn't. And in some twisted way, he got what he wanted. He is remembered. Every child who's heard the rhyme, divorced, beheaded, died. Every student who sees the portraits. Every tourist who walks this floor. We carry pieces of the fire that was Henry, but they don't carry the smell. They don't know the screams in the night, the cracking of joints, the wet sound of skin tearing from linen, the prayers whispered to a God he no longer trusted. You do. You were there when the chair groaned under his weight, when the velvet bled through the velvet, when he asked if his soul would leak like his body had. He wasn't just a king, he was a warning of what power does to flesh, of what fear does to men. And now, here he lies, swallowed by the very kingdom he ruled, the very earth he once crushed under his jeweled boots. So what was Henry VIII? A god? No. A monster? Sometimes. A man? Always. A man too big for his time, too proud to listen, too broken to bend. A man who built an empire to outlive him, and yet couldn't stop his own skin from falling off his bones. So, the torch has passed. To his son Edward, too young, too fragile. To his daughters Mary and Elizabeth, already haunted by the wreckage of their father's legacy. They will wear the crown, but they'll never escape the shadow of that throne. Because when you build power on fear and blood, it doesn't die with you. It lingers. It erupts in the walls. It seeps through the floorboards. It wakes. And as you walk away from the tomb, the echo of Henry's footsteps seems to follow you. Slow, heavy, inescapable. The crown has moved on, but the stain remains. The stone beneath your feet begins to fade into shadow, the chapel walls fall away, and now all that's left is quiet. Deep, soft, patient quiet. No throne, no torchlight, no weeping choir, only the breath in your chest and the steady hum of silence. It's strange, isn't it, how someone so loud, so enormous, so relentless, could end up like this. Still, forgotten by the floor he lies under, reduced to a name carved in stone. A man who once devoured the world with appetite, ego, fire, and who was, in the end, eaten by himself. The body gave out long before the crown did. And now you see it clearly. The flesh that burned, the leg that oozed, the screams that went unanswered. The aching hunger for sons. The wild grip on power. The rot behind the gold. All of it real, all of it gone. But not entirely. Because pieces of Henry remain, in portraits, yes, in textbooks, in pop culture, in ruins and rhymes, in royal lines. But also in every person who fears weakness, in every ruler who tears down the past to protect their ego, in every story that tries too hard to forget what bodies are made of. Fat, blood, bone, breath. Just like his. Just like yours. And now, the candle has burned low, the palace doors are shut, the ghosts have quieted. Let them rest. Let you rest. The story ends here. Close your eyes, drift deep. Sweet dreams.